Hello and welcome to D.O.N.E. Darrin offends nearly everyone. This is my second video. For those who haven't watched the intro, please go ahead and watch that. Basically, I'm going to try to video and the Mixcloud at the same time. This will be the first quote-unquote episode of D.O.N.E. for that. So, what is the offense today? I'm going to talk about a religious subject. Now, I've tried to avoid religion in the past. I've unfortunately got stuck on politics in the past. But I'm going to talk on a religious topic this time. It's not so much it's more of a teaching. Okay? So, yeah. We're going to go off in this other kind of new direction with the videos. If I don't like where it's going, then I may go back. But I did take a year break, so maybe I didn't like that other stuff. Anyway, the topic I want to talk about is Hannukah. Now, for those who don't know, right here up front, I'm Jewish. Okay? Wasn't born Jew. Well, I was born Jewish as far as lineage. My grandfather, great-grandfather, something like that. Anyway, but we weren't raised Jewish. We were raised LDS, Mormon. But anyway, I am currently Jewish. I am a weird kind of Jewish in that I am a Messianic Jew, which means I study and obey the rules of the Old Testament, the first 5 books, the Torah, but I also have the grace given to us by Jesus. So, yeah, I will kind of touch on that here a little bit. There's different sects of Judaism, okay? Just like there are in Christianity. You have Baptist, you have Catholic, you have Lutheran, you have a ton of others. Almost as many people as there are on the planet. That's how many different groups there are of Christian or Islam or any of that. That they're all over the place. Jews are no exception. We can't agree on anything, so we make different groups up. There's Hasidic, there's Reform. We make segregations, and we all belong to these individual little groups. Now, I am a non-Talmudic Jew. Talmud means teachings, and it's the teachings of the rabbis that have come before. Basically, Gamliel, Jesus' teacher, he is included in that. He's in that Talmud. I study primarily Torah, not Talmud. But like I says, I have the grace of the New Testament, so it's really confusing, and a lot of Jews don't accept that I'm Jewish because I don't accept Talmud. Others don't accept me being Jewish because I'm Messianic. So, yeah, it's kind of a mess there. But going back to Hannukah, there's a lot of confusion because of all these different sects about what Hannukah is. Hannukah is called the Festival of Lights or the Festival of Dedication, and I will go into that here a little bit later. It's called the Festival of Lights because of a story that came out of this teaching. The Talmud, one version of the Talmud, there's multiple versions of the Talmud, but one version has a story that when they reconquered the temple grounds and they went to rededicate the temple, there was only one casket of oil found, and it would last for a day. And somehow a miracle happened, and it lasted 8 days. That's the story. That's why they call it the Festival of Lights. However, there's huge holes in that story. I'll go into some of them here, but there are others. When you study the historical record, Josephus even mentions the Festival of Dedication or the Festival of Lights. It's in the Bible as the Festival of Lights. So Jews have been celebrating this ever since this event. This started up in the Maccabees. Now, the Maccabees the books of the Maccabees, talks about the Maccabean revolt. It really shouldn't be called that. If you study it, it wasn't Maccabean who started it. It wasn't Maccabeus. It was his father. His name was Matthias. Matthias was a high priest in the temple. When he was asked to make a sacrifice of an unclean animal on the altar, he refused. Anyway, he started the rebellion. Upon his death, his second oldest child, Judas, which is kind of funny. If Matthias is a full high priest, that means all of his children are priests. So Judas, called Maccabeus, so Judas is a priest. Judas the priest. Anyway, that was a nice little sidebar. He was called Maccabeus. His name was Judas ben Matthias, but he was called Maccabeus. And it's just like in the New Testament time, Paul his name is Saul, but he was called Paul. Jesus was Yeshua, and yet he's called Jesus. So it's very common when a country is occupied by another country to have your name that you use in private and then a name that is out on the street name. It's very common. It even happens today, but I'm not going into that. So the Maccabean revolt was about Maccabeus, who was Judas bar Matthias. It was him taking the army that his father built, building up more, and actually leading a revolt to where they was able to retake the temple grounds. Once they retook the temple grounds, they found it in ruins. It says in, I think it's the first chapter of the book of the Maccabees, the first book of the Maccabees, which there is, Cambridge has a book 1 that is different than everybody else's book 1. Their book 2 is everybody else's book 1, but it's only Cambridge. I think that's a prequel. I'm not sure, but if you're reading the Cambridge, it's book 2. Everybody else has it as book 1. So in book 1, I think it's chapter 1, they talk about when the Syrians or Greeks, don't remember who, attacked Israel at that time, took all of the implements of the temple out. That's the lampstand, that's the table for the showbread. Everything that was made of gold got shipped away. They didn't have it anymore. So when Maccabeus went up to the temple ground, he lamented over the fact that there was nothing there. It was left in ruins. It was disgusting. They needed to clean it up. They needed to rebuild the gates. They needed to rebuild, in the temple grounds, there's apartments that I guess are built, out of wood along a wall where the priests, are at. Those were gone. So everything had to be rebuilt. The table for the showbread and the lampstand also had to be rebuilt. So the idea that they found this one casket, and the casket is important because the high priest has to watch over and make sure that the oil is made correctly, and then he puts his seal on the wax that seals the container to say this is kosher. Literally, the term means fit and proper. But this is certified, we can use this. If they had only found one casket sealed, as the story goes, then they still had time to make more because they had to do all this other stuff as well. That's one of the holes in the story. The other thing is the priests, in order to make the sacrifices, had to sequester themselves for 3 days. They stayed away from everybody else for 3 days, baptized themselves every day to make sure that they were clean and could actually offer sacrifices. So there was plenty of time to make new oil. This story about the oil, there's a lot of evidence against it. Probably the most condemning evidence. Because I'm educated, I know that you have to have sites. You have to cite your sources. You have to show where you got your evidence. You can't just make something up and call it good. Show where you got your evidence and prove your point. That's the whole point of DONE, right? Show me the evidence and I'll admit when I'm wrong. Well, same thing goes with this. In this one story, it's only in one place, one version of the Talmud has one passage that says, our rabbis taught us that there was only one sealed casket and that the miracle burned for 8 days. Or something to that effect. I don't remember the exact wording. But it does not say which rabbis taught this. It does not say where they got their information from. It just says, our rabbis have taught us. So there's no evidence to go back and say, this is this way or this is that way. Well, I found that kind of interesting, so I looked for the evidence. I looked through a lot of historical records. Ones that are available on the internet. Anyway, I looked through what I could find, and every historical record points to the military victory of a couple hundred rebels versus thousands of the army. That's the miracle that happened, is this small group overthrew this huge and powerful group. I assume guerrilla warfare and all of that, but that is what the records show was the miracle. It said nothing about the oil. In fact, the only thing that it really says after that military victory is that once they dedicated the altar again, and the oil lamps were lit and the sacrifices began again, that the party continued for 8 days, an 8-day party. And in the Talmud, other versions of the Talmud as well, not just the one that has that other passage, it says that the obligation of keeping Hannukah is that you are supposed to be celebrating the entire 8 days of Hannukah. When I was growing up, when you had a celebration, beer was involved. I don't know, I've never read anything where the Jews require drinking on Hannukah, but it sounds like it could have been involved, Anyway, so it's supposed to be a celebration. Great. I know I can't celebrate for 8 days straight. I have to sleep for a little bit. Maybe when I was young I could have celebrated for 8 days straight, but I never put that to the test, and I certainly ain't gonna do it now that I'm a little bit older. Anyway, let's see. I wanted to cover another point about Hannukah, but I can't seem to remember. Oh, yes, the candles. The candelabra that we use on Hannukah has 9 candlesticks. There's a lesson in the candles. Well, the Hannukah, the candle branches. It has the 8 for the 8 days of Hannukah, so that we are celebrating the lights, as said in the Bible, etc. It's not because of the oil, it's about the light given to us, basically through the altar, through the sacrifices on the altar. But they always have 9 on a Talmudic accurate Hannukah. The reason is one is always raised, and it's called the servant candle. And what that does is you light it first, and you light it before sundown, and then after sundown you use it to light all the others. 1 for the first night, 2 for the second night, 3 for the third night, so on and so forth. Or, the other version of the Talmud, you start with 9 and you work your way down to 1. Anyway, those aren't really important. The important thing is to remember for 8 days, celebrate, party, right? Anyway, the servant candle is what's important. The reason why it is raised higher than everything else is because it is the symbol of Messiah. The servant, our Messiah, Jesus, for those who don't call him Yeshua, he is our servant, and yet he was risen high. That's the kind of thing that's implemented into the Hannukah story. It's implemented all throughout Judaism, and a lot of Jews just don't see it. I have other lessons that I've taught elsewhere, not on this channel. But anyway, yeah. So we have that serving candle. We celebrate for 8 days. It's a party. The story of the Maccabees, the story of the Maccabean revolt, was actually very, very, incredible. It was, 2 years to the day after the sacrifices were stopped the first time that an altar was placed up in its place, and, human sacrifice, okay, that's another story. Unclean sacrifices were meant to happen, but two human sacrifices happened on that altar. The high priest that sacrificed the unclean animal and the general or lieutenant or whatever he was who ordered it, both of them were killed on the altar that same day. So anyway, you have human sacrifices happening on the altar, unclean animals happening on the altar, exactly 2 years to the day after the sacrifices originally stopped, and then 2 years to the day, well, it's a year to the season, not to the day, that they overtook the temple ground, and then 2 years later, they restarted sacrifices on a whole new altar. They had to take the stones away and bring in new stones. This is another evidence that there was plenty of time to make oil. They had to go out and find the stones that were not hammered. Unhewn stones is what it calls. So, stones that were a certain shape and could be put together to make a certain size that had never been struck with a hammer. That was one of the important things that they obsessively had to prepare for. So they had to go out and find those, and they brought them in and rebuilt the altar. They had to collect the gold for the showbread table and the lampstand and the other implements, and they had to make those things. And that lesson of the Maccabees actually taught us as Jews, burned into our collective minds, we are to be prepared. Now, we should have known this before, because throughout the Torah, throughout Moses' day, that's all he talked about, is prepare this for this, prepare that for that. Throughout the week, the 6 days of the week, non-Sabbath, we're supposed to collect extra wood, so that on the Sabbath, we do not go out and collect it. Anyone who goes out and collects wood on the Sabbath day was to be killed. Yay! The first guy, according to the Torah, was killed by God. So, yay! We are supposed to be prepared ahead of time. We're supposed to have this stuff done ahead of time. That, along with that teaching, along with the story of the Maccabees, has actually helped modern day Jews. Burned into our collective memory that we needed to be prepared. So the Temple Institute, years ago, 20 years that I know of, and it's probably gone on longer than that, they have had, locked in a special storage facility, unhewn stones, a menorah made out of gold, a show table that is covered with gold, all of the implements, all of the stuff to restart sacrifice at the temple is ready, so that within 6 days of the announcement of being allowed onto the Temple Mount to put it in place, within 6 days they can have it working. It'd probably take a little bit extra, because they'll probably dedicate it on a certain day of the year, but they could do that in 6 days. That's how ready they are. And it was because of the story of the Maccabees that happened. They allowed it to burn into their brains. Anyway, so the story of the Hannukah is more than the Maccabean revolt. It's more than the light for 8 days. The story of the oil is where we actually get that we cook with oil. On Hanukkah, it's tradition to have all kinds of greasy food. Well, not necessarily greasy, oily food. Breads made with oil, we call them donuts. Yeah. Donuts, we have lackeys, which are hash browns, deep fried in oil. Anyway, all kinds of oily food for those 8 days. I do put on weight. Anyway, it's a great time of year. Wonderful celebration. This year it starts, Jewish days start at sundown, and that makes it a little confusing for most people. Jewish days start at sundown. And so, I'm not sure if the Hanukkah starts the 24th because it's sundown the 24th and starts on the 25th, or if it starts on the sundown of the 25th. I haven't looked up on the calendar to know that yet. So, yeah, this year it's right about Christmas time. So I'm going to sit there and celebrate. If it starts on Christmas Day, that means the 8th day would be like the 1st, something like that. So New Year's resolutions, right? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off short. This has just been kind of a talky episode, a teaching episode about Hanukkah. No big offenses here unless you're offended the fact that I'm Jewish, and then deal with it. But this is Darrin, and I'm done.